The internet and social media play a huge role in all of our lives. It's in our pockets, our workplaces, and our homes. But increasingly, it's being used as a tool to groom children.
Unfortunately, it's not an uncommon issue to come across, and because it's online and technology-based, it can really evolve, and it can evolve quicker than we can keep up with.
Tackling online child abuse is a priority for law enforcement, but they only see a fraction of cases. For the first time, researchers are exposing the true scale of the problem in Scotland.
This is, multiple children in every classroom. We all know someone who's either engaging or has been a victim of this type of abuse.
We've been hearing about the impact these crimes have on victims.
1 minute you're 15 and you're just having fun on a social media app, and then the next time you're suddenly in so much trouble and you feel like you're the only person in the world and you don't actually know where to turn with it.
So what more can be done to keep children safe online?
The tech companies aren't treating it in a way that you would treat it in the real world. If a crime took place out in the street, the police wouldn't be negotiating, can we have access to that scene? That would be a crime scene.
When Aoife Houghton was 15, she was busy studying for her National 5 exams and loved practising Irish dancing. Like most teenagers, she also spent a lot of time online and on social media.
It was all kind of through your usual Instagram, Snapchat, all of that. It was just kind of like second nature, really. It was something that one day I knew how to work it and then everyone had it.
It was while using social media that Aoife got chatting to a boy her age. He asked her to download another app, which was an encrypted private messenger.
After we were messaging for a while, he'd asked for pictures of myself, and I did it. I was 15.
But after she shared an intimate photo, Aoife says the conversation took a turn.
Within a message, it changed. He basically came out and said that he was much older than me. I think at the time he said that he was 22. He had a degree in cybersecurity, something like that. The way that he described himself was that he was sort of untouchable and that he was so powerful that it didn't matter what I did.
For hours, the man demanded more and more pictures from Aoife.
I remember the bit for me that gave me the kind of the shock of my life was, if you don't comply with these, then I'll send these photos that you've already sent me to your Facebook family and friends. It just felt like, how in the film, in like the movies, when someone's like alone and then everything just turns black. That's the way that I felt. And Mum and Dad were down the hall and my sisters were in their rooms, but I felt like I was the only person that was ever in the world. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do here.
Aoife was one of thousands of children who are targeted by online abusers every year in Scotland. The crimes can include non-consensual taking, sharing or exposure to sexual images and videos. Some children can then find themselves the victims of extortion, or, like in Aoife's case, being blackmailed into sending more explicit content. Police Scotland recorded just over 2,000 reports of online child abuse last year.
What we see with services like Police Scotland or even social welfare type services is that they'll see the tip of the iceberg. We know from all of the research we've done that many children will never tell anyone and the abuse will remain hidden.
Professor Deborah Fry is the Director of Data at Childlight, a group which investigates the prevalence of child abuse. Their research estimates that 300 million children across the world have experienced at least one form of online exploitation or abuse in the last year. In Scotland, that equates to 150,000, enough to fill Hampden Park 3 times over.
We gathered all of these studies from representative surveys of children and young people. So this is their own experiences, their own reports of experiences, and then use statistical techniques to pull that data together to produce regional estimates.
Tell me about that as a method of data projection. How reliable is this kind of form of research?
Yeah, so it's often systematic reviews are considered gold standard in terms of the ability to pull together multiple data sources or findings from surveys to produce, something that's useful to policymakers and practitioners.
Childlight works closely with Police Scotland to give them information not only about the number of victims, but also of perpetrators.
So we conducted a multi-country study, so UK, Australia, US, of men around their behaviours online. And we found in the UK, which included a population within Scotland, that 1 in every 14 men self-reported committing online offending behaviours, ranging from deliberately looking at child sexual abuse material to paying for sexual content involving children or engaging in sexual conversations with children online.
The numbers we already see from police are shocking enough. To actually see the true scale this is happening on is just staggering. What difference does that make?
I think being able to see the true scale is incredibly important, because not only for frontline services that need to make business cases for investment within their areas, but also so that we understand that we really need to take a preventative approach. So we really need to be thinking about, how do we stop this from ever happening in the first place?
But for those who've already been targeted, finding the right help quickly is critical. Aoife says while she was filled with panic and dread, she remembered a helpline she'd been told about in school.
I'd managed to convince this man that I was going to bed because I had school in the morning, and didn't believe me, and I had to send, he made me send him a timetable. Once that was done and he'd let me go to sleep, that's when I went on to COP and I'd put my information in. So the way that it works is they did it through the school.
The next day, Aoife's teacher phoned her dad.
He kind of sat me down and he was like, "The school have just phoned. They've said that you've reported this incident that happened last night. Tell me about it." And then I just broke down. It was difficult, one thing of knowing that this person had all this power over you and they had these pictures of you. It's another thing having to admit it to your mum and dad. I was just more worried because I was going to go, what are they going to think of me now? But after I told them, they were very supportive, and my dad was like, right, we'll phone the police and then we'll let them deal with it.
After an 18-month investigation by the police and the National Crime Agency, Aoife's abuser, a man in West Sussex, was tracked down.
Serial paedophile Jordan Croft shackled arriving at court after admitting trapping 26 vulnerable young girls in a warped online web of exploitation.
He admitted 65 offences against 26 girls and women aged between 12 and 22. In 2022, he was jailed for 18 years and will spend another 8 years on licence. Tell me about the moment that you saw this man getting sentenced for what he'd done to you. It must have been really emotional.
Yeah, it was quite overwhelming from an emotional point of view. Me and the girls, we were all holding hands and stuff, which was a really powerful moment, but it was really overwhelming, and I don't think I quite understood how emotionally overwhelming it would be.
Paul Stanfield is the Chief Executive of Childlight. He spent over 30 years working in law enforcement, including at the NCA and Interpol. He says it can feel impossible for victims of child abuse to speak about what's happened.
It's the level of stigmatisation and the shame that people feel. I've been approached by people who've kept it to themselves for over 50 years and they're telling me about it. They're not going to the police to report it, they're telling me, and they're only beginning to tell the family today after 50 years.
In October, a 26-year-old man from Northern Ireland, described as one of the world's most prolific child abusers, was sentenced to a minimum of 20 years in prison.
McCartney is a dangerous predator. He was relentless and cruel.
Alexander McCartney pretended to be a teenage girl to befriend, then abuse and blackmail children around the world.
This was child abuse on an industrial scale.
The investigation into him was triggered after a young girl in Scotland reported what had happened to her.
3,500 victims identified. Only 4 reported it to the police.
how important do you think it is to shift the blame away from the victim in a case like this onto the perpetrator, that sense of shame around it?
Oh, I think it's probably one of the most important conversations that you need to have. I kind of took blame for a lot of what happened to me up until, I want to say, November 2022. It was kind of after the whole sentencing thing that I was like, oh, actually, maybe it was him that was the issue and it wasn't me.
Aoife now volunteers with the NSPCC, working with other victims of child sex abuse.
Hi there, you're through to someone you could talk to at Childline.
Call handlers at the charity's Childline service are often the first people they'll tell about what's happened.
That's okay, we're here to support you.
So last year specifically we had over 2,000 contacts about sexual exploitation online. So we see people coming to us with those kind of grooming concerns, or my family's going to hear about this, my school's going to hear about this. They're going to worry about maintaining friendships, they're going to worry about can they get a career after this if it ends up online.
Lauren Burke has worked at Childline for 8 years. She says children who call are sometimes very distressed, and that dealing with that is one of the most important parts of the job.
What would you like to talk to me about today?
If you were to pick up the phone and a child on the other end said to you, I've been blackmailed, I've sent nude pictures to someone, they're threatening to send them to everyone I know, what would you say to them? What is your advice?
So initially what we want to know is we want to know how that young person's feeling about it. And once they feel that they're in a place that they're ready to talk about what's happened, or maybe they want to look at next steps, that's when we can start introducing, okay, what do you want to do about it? And how can we support you to get there? What we wouldn't want to do is have a blanket, just go and tell your mum, because it might not be the safest person that they can tell. But once we've kind of established the relationship that they already have, we'll kind of slowly work towards that.
Childlight wants online child abuse to be treated as a public health issue on account of the lasting damage it can cause. The group says it's impossible for police to tackle it alone, but Paul believes social media companies also have a lot to answer for.
And unfortunately at the moment, because there's no regulation on the internet, it really is the Wild West, anything goes. And so what you're doing is trying to play catch up, but as a result of it, it's really grown exponentially, and it continues to grow exponentially.
We know so many children now are on social media, they have social media accounts. How big of a tool is social media for abusers of children?
It's a key enabler. It's a key enabler, and it's grown exponentially as a result of it. You've provided child sex offenders with a platform by which they can come together.
The social media companies obviously have the tools to get on top of this.
Yeah.
Why aren't they?
Exactly. That's the question that we ask. It is a decision to put privacy before safety. And people have just made that argument, said that's how it is. We choose to put privacy before safety. And we say, well, if you can't self-regulate and governments want to change that, then they can bring in regulations and legislation.
A spokesperson for the UK government told us that the introduction of the Online Safety Act next summer will introduce strong safeguards for children online, and that platforms that fail to protect children from online sexual abuse could face significant fines. But in the meantime, Aoife says the most important thing a victim can do is ask for help.
Just tell anyone, tell someone that you trust and someone that you think will look after you. It'll be probably one of the hardest conversations of your life, but it's so worth it, because ultimately they're going to be the ones that point you in the right direction.
Why is it so important for you to do something like this today to get that message out to people?
I think a lot of the time that it happens to other people, they're not in the same sort of position as I am of my abuser's already in jail. He doesn't have power over me, so I can turn something that's actually disgusting and horrible, and I can turn it into a good thing where I can potentially help other people, and they can go, it can happen to me, and I'll be able to know the right steps to take.